Everybody, hello, welcome to the NNP Symposium. This is the fifth symposium, NNP Symposium, that we have had the pleasure of organizing and running. So we are glad that you guys were able to join us for this. This is the second of 3 days of presentations. So we had great presentations, great turnout yesterday. So far, a really good day of presentations today. They'll be running the rest of the day today and tomorrow as well. So we hope that you tune into more of those as you guys can. I will go over a few housekeeping type things before I introduce our speaker for the hour, one of which being the Q&A button. At the end of the presentation, we'll have a question and answer session. So if you have questions throughout the presentation, just feel free to drop them in there. I will be reading them all off anonymously. You can check anonymously or not when you submit a question, but I will read them all anonymously. So never fear. So that should be a really good time to learn from Mr. Noel. And then the other item is recording. So we are recording this meeting. If you guys want to watch a presentation that you didn't get to see, or you want to watch another one again, whatever the reason may be, we are recording all of these and they'll be available on our website roughly 2 weeks after the NNP Symposium closes. So just a heads up on both of those. I will go ahead and introduce our speaker. Franklin, if you want to go ahead and turn your video and your sound on. Everybody, we have Mr. Franklin Noel speaking with us today for this hour. He's talking to us about A Tale of Two Collectors. So this is a story of Mr. Eliasberg and Charles Williams, two collectors. And I don't really know a whole lot about either of them. So personally, I'm excited to hear all of the wisdom and the research you've put together on this. So Mr. Noel, I will let you go for it.
Okay, well, thank you, Andy. I spoke at the very first Newman Numismatic Portal Symposium, and so I'm happy to be back, and I want to thank the NNP for having me. As Andy said, this is the story. This is the story of two coin collectors. Many are familiar with Louis E. Eliasberg, the only collector to have assembled a complete set of US coins by date and mint mark. Fewer know his contemporary, Charles M. Williams, who also assembled a world-class collection of US coins in the first half of the 20th century. Until quite recently, I had never heard of Charles Williams. I was fascinated to learn his story, and I thought others might find it interesting as well. Eliasberg and Williams have much in common, but there are also significant differences between the two men. This presentation will introduce you to them both. With apologies to Charles Dickens, I call this presentation A Tale of Two Collectors. Both men benefited from what we today would call white privilege, but neither was what we would call a WASP, a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. At a time when religion was more important to one's social status than it might be today, Eliasberg was Jewish and Williams was a Roman Catholic. Eliasberg was largely a self-made man, while Williams was born into an already successful family that owned a thriving insurance company. Eliasberg was a Southerner whose family moved about during his youth, while Williams was from the Midwest and whose family, by the time of his birth, was firmly rooted in Cincinnati, Ohio. So let's meet these two collectors. Louis E. Eliasberg was born in 1896 in the Deep South, Selma, Alabama. But by the time he was 11, his family had moved first to Atlanta, Georgia, and then ultimately to the more northern, but still segregated southern city of Baltimore, Maryland. He graduated from a Baltimore public high school incongruously called City College. There was a time when graduation from City College entitled a student to attend nearby Johns Hopkins University without having to take an entrance exam. This is a picture of City College, Baltimore at about the time Eliasberg would have graduated. The school later moved to much more elaborate quarters located on a hilltop in Baltimore. Founded in 1839, it remains one of Baltimore's premier public high schools. So far as I have been able to determine, Eliasberg never graduated from an actual college. It appears he did attend the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, but only for one semester. In 1915, Eliasberg's father, Adolf, died at the young age of 49. Louis was only 19 years old. Despite his youth, Eliasberg handled the settlement of his father's estate. 4 years later, when he was only 23, he raised $35,000 from some Baltimore investors and bought a finance company, which he renamed the Finance Company of America. In 1927, he married Hortense M. Kahn, and together they had 2 children, Louis Jr. and Richard. Sadly, Hortense died in 1949, leaving Louis Eliasberg a widower. Over the years, Eliasberg expanded his business horizon and became involved in a variety of different business ventures. Among other interests, he was a founding investor and director of the Baltimore National Bank. He also dabbled in Major League Baseball. In 1953, he and some others joined together to bring the St. Louis Browns to Baltimore. He renamed them the Baltimore Orioles. Charles M. Williams was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, in 1912. In 1934, he graduated from Georgetown University. This is a photograph of Georgetown's iconic Healy Hall as it looked when Charles Williams attended. 6 years after graduation, he married Elizabeth H. Seifried, and the couple had 3 children, a son and 2 daughters. Immediately after college, Williams went to work as a salesman for the family's insurance business. By 1951, he had risen to the position of president. He later became the chairman of the board, a post he held until 1973. After leaving the position of chairman, he remained a director for the rest of his life. The Williams family also dabbled in Major League Baseball. At one time, Charles's brother, William Williams, owned the Cincinnati Reds. It was during the nadir of the Great Depression that both men took up coin collecting in a serious way. In 1933, the US unemployment rate reached nearly 25%. The highest unemployment rate in United States history. Most historians and economists agree that 1933 was the low point of the Great Depression. Throughout his life, Eliasberg prided himself on navigating his business through the Depression with minimal disruption. The Depression, in particular the government's response to it, energized Eliasberg's interest in collecting coins. While he began collecting as early as 1925, he was quoted later in life saying that his interest really took off in 1933, when Congress and President Roosevelt outlawed the private ownership of gold. Both Roosevelt's executive order banning the hoarding of gold, seen here on the left, and the Gold Reserve Act which outlawed the private ownership of gold, had exceptions for gold coins with numismatic value. As Eliasberg was a hard money man, he took refuge in the numismatic exception and started buying up gold coins. Indeed, it was his collection of US gold coins that was completed first. Eliasberg soon expanded his numismatic horizon and set as his goal the acquisition of one specimen of every coin by date and mint mark ever issued by the US Mint. Like Eliasberg, Charles Williams' father guided the family business through the Great Depression with minimal disruption. I don't know when Williams bought his first coin, but I do know that by January 1933, while he was still a student at Georgetown, his name appeared among the new members of the American Numismatic Association, published in the January 1933 issue of the Numismatist, seen here on the right. Like his role in the family business, Charles Williams' involvement in coin collecting may also have been a family affair. Eliasberg was 15 years older than Williams and likely started collecting coins before Williams did. But it was Williams' collection that was first recognized as being the most complete. William Forrester Dunham died in 1936. At the time, Dunham was a well-known coin collector whose collection was once described as, quote, the best known private numismatic collection formed in America, end quote. Dunham's collection included some of the rarest US coins known, including the Dexter specimen of the 1804 silver dollar and several very rare US gold half eagles, including the 1822, of which only 3 exist. To interest Williams in acquiring some of the rarities in the Dunham collection, in 1940, Texas coin dealer B. Max Mell, who had purchased the collection, wrote a letter to Williams and his father, Charles F. Williams. In his letter, Mell wrote, quote, "You now possess one of the finest and most complete collections of American coins in the world. But with the addition of the rarities now offered you, especially the 1804 dollar and the 1822 half eagle, your doubts as to the final completion of your collection will now and forever be removed. You will have what no other collector has, and with the 1822 half eagle, what no other collector, save one, ever possessed. This is something really very important for you and your father to think about." The senior Mr. Williams, Charles F., was a well-known art collector. He started collecting local Ohio artists, but soon graduated to European old masters. When he purchased the 17th century Portrait of a Young Girl by Peter Paul Rubens, it was reported in the New York Times. That Mell addressed the letter to both Charles M. Williams and his father, Charles F. Williams, suggests to me that numismatics might have been a family affair, as it was for the Garretts, and as we shall see in a minute, the Clapps. Or perhaps Mell simply thought Williams would require financial assistance to afford the coins Mell was offering. The catalog and prices realized for the Dunham auction show that the 1804 dollar and the Dunham 1822 half eagle sold in the auction for record sums. But Q. David Bowers contends that both coins were sold privately to Williams before the Dunham auction ever occurred. In any event, we know that these two coins entered the Williams collection. More on each in a moment. (1942). I don't have any evidence that Williams and Eliasberg were consciously competing with one another. But with hindsight, it is clear that if Eliasberg wanted to fulfill his goal of collecting by date and mint mark every US coin struck, he had some catching up to do. In 1942, opportunity knocked. 2 years earlier, John H. Clapp died. Clapp, building upon a collection begun by his father in the 19th century, had amassed what coin dealers J.B. and Morton Stack described as, quote, one of the most important money accumulations ever assembled. Let me just pause here for a moment to note that coin dealers, then as now, are sometimes prone to hyperbole. In any event, the Stack brothers brought the Clapp collection to the attention of Louis Eliasberg, who, on February 4th, 1942, wrote them a letter in which he offered to pay the unprecedented sum of $100,000 for the entire collection. Eliasberg offered Stacks a $1,000 commission for alerting him to the opportunity. The purchase of the Clapp collection brought within reach Eliasberg's goal of acquiring one of every US coin. To keep track of dates and mint marks he still needed, Eliasberg used a 1936 booklet published by a Chicago coin dealer, Charles E. Green, called The Mint Record and Type Table, United States Coins. In 1942, the first red book, which we might use in a similar way today, was still 4 years away. I mentioned a moment ago that Williams had joined the American Numismatic Association in January 1933. Eliasberg had some catching up to do on that score as well. He did not join the ANA until August 1940. But in 1947, he upgraded his membership and became ANA Life Member number 169. (1950) Mid-century mileposts. 1950 was a turning point in the collecting lives of both Charles Williams and Louis Eliasberg. Abe Kossoff was a well-known coin dealer with whom both Williams and Eliasberg worked. He published a regular price list / newsletter that he called the Numismatic Gallery Monthly. Sometime before June 1950, Charles Williams sold his entire coin collection for $250,000 to a partnership put together by Saul Kaplan and Abe Kossoff. Kossoff announced the purchase in the January 1951 issue of his Numismatic Gallery Monthly, seen here on the left, after he had already sold most of the coins. Using the hyperbole that appears characteristic of coin dealers, the newsletter states, quote, "In the most spectacular numismatic transaction ever concluded, the famous collection formed by Mr. Charles M. Williams, insurance executive of Cincinnati, Ohio, was sold outright for a sum in excess of $250,000. We are proud indeed to have participated in this history-making event." Also in 1950, Louis Eliasberg reached his goal of owning one of every coin struck by the US Mint. On November 7th, 1950, Eliasberg acquired the last coin he needed to complete his collection. As seen here on the right, in April of 1951, Kossoff recognized this other mid-century milepost in his Numismatic Gallery Monthly. Again, using coin dealer hyperbole, he referred to his earlier auction of what Kossoff had called in 1945 the world's greatest collection, and then added, "The king is dead. Long live the king." Today, a new collection has claim to that title. Mr. Louis Eliasberg of Baltimore, Maryland, lays justifiable claim for his magnificent numismatic holdings as the world's greatest collection of U.S. coins. From 1950 on, the numismatic lives of these two collectors diverged dramatically. Before we learn what direction each took, let's compare some of the amazing rare coins they each owned. Both men owned a Class I 1804 silver dollar. Only 15 silver dollars that bear the date 1804 are known to exist. 8 of them are what we call Class I. None of the extant 1804 dollars were struck in 1804. Those called Class I were struck by the mint at the request of the State Department in the 1830s for diplomatic purposes. The rest were struck later in the 19th century to satisfy collector demand. Louis Eliasberg owned what is known as the Stickney specimen. This is a photograph of Eliasberg's actual coin. He acquired it from the Cutler Atwater collection that was auctioned in 1946 by B. Max Mell, who traced its provenance back to Matthew Stickney, who acquired it directly from the United States Mint. Charles Williams owned the Dexter Class I 1804 dollar. This is a photograph of the actual 1804 dollar Williams owned. This coin was listed as lot 1058 in the catalog of the Dunham collection auctioned by B. Max Mell in 1941 for the record price of $4,250. But as mentioned earlier, the coin was likely placed privately with Charles Williams well before the Dunham auction ever occurred. Whether at auction or privately, we know that Williams acquired this coin because when Abe Kossoff announced his 1950 acquisition of the Williams collection, he mentioned that he had already placed the Dexter dollar in, quote, the cabinet of a discriminating New York collector. Another great rarity they both managed to acquire was the 1822 half eagle. Only 3 specimens exist, and one was owned by the Smithsonian Institution and not available to collectors. Today, 2 of the 3 are locked up in the Smithsonian Institution. As with the 1804 Dexter dollar, Williams likely acquired his 1822 half eagle privately from the Dunham collection when B. Max Mell offered it to him and his dad in 1940. According to Dave Bowers, before selling the coin to Williams, he had also offered the coin to John Work Garrett, who declined to purchase it. The coin was nominally listed as lot number 2095 in the Dunham catalog, and the price realized is reported as $11,575. We know Williams acquired it because when Abe Kossoff announced his purchase of the Williams collection, he said he had already sold the Dunham 1822 half eagle for a record price. This is a photograph of the actual coin Williams owned. Eliasberg owned the 1822 half-eagle, once belonging to Chicago brewer Virgil Brand, who had acquired the coin in 1899. At Brand's death in 1926, the coin passed to his brother, who held it until 1945. It was then that Abe Kossoff acquired the coin and sold it to Louis Eliasberg for $14,000, which at the time was the highest price ever paid for a single US coin. Again, this is a photograph of Eliasberg's actual coin. The 1933 double eagle. There are several prominent coin collectors whose unsuccessful efforts to acquire a specimen of what became the ultra-rare 1933 double eagle is well documented. Among them, John Work Garrett, whose family's coin collection was legendary, the American Numismatic Society, which made no less than 4 separate requests and took their case all the way to the Secretary of the Treasury, and the Connecticut State Library, whose collection then and now includes some of the most rare and unique numismatic specimens in the world. All were rebuffed. None of them ever acquired a 1933 double eagle. Amazingly, however, both Charles Williams and Louis Eliasberg appear to have had no trouble acquiring specimens of the 1933 $20 gold piece. In 1938, Williams paid B. Maxwell $1,000 for a 1933 double eagle. Williams had previously tried to purchase a specimen from a New York dealer who advised him to wait. He was sure the price would come down as more coins came on the market. When the Secret Service demanded the return of the coin, Williams was initially combative. But on June 21, 1944, Williams surrendered his specimen at the Secret Service field office in Cincinnati, Ohio. Eliasberg also paid $1,000 for his 1933 double eagle. Ironically, he purchased it on April 15, 1944, just over 2 months before Williams surrendered his specimen to the Secret Service. Eliasberg bought his coin from Philadelphia coin dealer Ira Reed. We know the details of Eliasberg's purchase because on August 21, 1952, Eliasberg sua sponte enclosed the coin together with a letter addressed to the superintendent of the U.S. Mint and delivered it by registered mail. In the letter, he explained where and when he acquired his 1933 double eagle and why he was returning it to the Mint. He had heard that it was illegal to own one. The letter also inquired whether there was any possibility that the coin could be returned to him. The director of the Mint personally responded, no, it could not. This is a photograph of the only 1933 double eagle lawfully in private hands. Its story is well told in a book called Illegal Tender by David Tripp. I do not have a photograph of either collector's actual 1933 $20 gold piece, because in August 1956, the coins once possessed by Williams and Eliasberg, in the words of David Tripp, quote, tumbled into the searing heat of the crucible and were gone, reduced to a golden puddle. Even more rare than the 1933 double eagle, the 1822 half eagle, or the 1804 dollar, is the 1873 Carson City dime without arrows. It is unique. There is only one. In 1873, Congress increased slightly the authorized weight of US silver coinage. Small arrowheads were placed on either side of the date, right here and right here, to signify that they were minted to the new higher weight standard. Coins struck before the weight increase went into effect had no arrows at the date. This dime has no arrows. By 1950, Louis Eliasberg knew the 1873 Carson City dime without arrows was an extremely rare coin. He knew also that he needed one to complete his collection. He did not know that the 1873 CC no arrows dime was unique, and he did not know that the only specimen in existence was owned by Charles M. Williams. Eliasberg learned that one was available in June 1950 at an auction being conducted in Los Angeles by Abe Kossoff. Kossoff had acquired this coin when he and his partners purchased outright Williams' entire coin collection. To avoid traveling to California, Eliasberg reached out to Kossoff and offered him $2,000 for the 1873 dime, twice the estimated value the Kossoff catalog had placed on the coin. His offer was declined. Eliasberg made the cross-country trip from Baltimore to Los Angeles. There was only one other coin Eliasberg needed at this time to complete his collection. It was the 1853 O half dollar without arrows or rays. One of those was also in Kossoff's June 1950 auction, but not until the second day's session. If Eliasberg could acquire both the 1873 dime and the 1853 half dollar at Kossoff's auction, his collection would be complete. The opening bid on the 1873 dime was $1,100 and moved up quickly. Another bidder, a coin dealer by the name of James Kelly, appeared to want the coin as badly as Eliasberg did. Eventually, Eliasberg dropped out. James Kelly bought the dime for $3,650. Later, Eliasberg described his disappointment at failing to acquire the 1873 Carson City dime. I was so provoked that I did not attend the second session to bid for the half dollar. The next night, my friend Joe Stack bought the half dollar for me. 6 months later, Saul Kaplan, one of the coin dealers who had partnered with Kossoff in the purchase of Williams' collection, called Eliasberg. He wanted to know how much Eliasberg would pay for the dime. Now, this dime was the only coin standing between Eliasberg and a complete collection of US coins. He told Kaplan he would pay $4,000. Kaplan worked with Kelly, the successful bidder at the June auction in Los Angeles, and a deal was done on November 7th, 1950. Eliasberg's collection was complete. One of the great ironies I discovered while researching this presentation is that Williams' decision to liquidate his collection made possible the completion of Eliasberg's collection. Without this 1873 Carson City dime, Eliasberg's collection could not have been complete. By the way, if any of you are looking to own this unique Carson City dime without arrows, it is being auctioned again by Heritage at the Fun Show in January. Eliasberg started collecting coins in 1925, and by 1950, his collection was complete. Over the next 25 years, he doubled down on his numismatic interest. Eliasberg maintained his collection's completeness and exhibited it frequently and freely. One of the first exhibits was in his hometown at the Baltimore National Bank, of which he was a founder and director. The brochure he prepared in connection with the exhibit understated his role. It read, quote, "This notable collection is exhibited through the courtesy of one of our depositors." In April 1953, Life magazine ran a multi-page spread with some color photographs of the Eliasberg collection. In August 1953, Eliasberg exhibited his collection at the ANA convention held that year in Dallas, Texas. He did not enter the exhibit competition, but was given special recognition by the ANA for bringing his collection to Dallas. Over the years, he mounted his coin exhibit in several other cities, including New York, New Haven, Chicago, and Philadelphia. In 1960, his collection became the first private collection to be displayed at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. The exhibit drew 1.5 million visitors. In 1964, Life magazine competitor, Look magazine, also ran an article about Eliasberg's collection, which also included several photos of the coins. In 1974, having been a widower for 25 years, he married Lucille Jones, who he had known for many years as she was the widow of one of his friends. On November 9, 1975, Eliasberg gave an address about how he came to assemble his collection. The remarks were delivered at Evergreen House in his native Baltimore, the former home of the Garrett family, now owned by Johns Hopkins University. To celebrate the nation's bicentennial in 1976, arrangements were made to display the Eliasberg collection at the United States Mint in Philadelphia. Eliasberg never saw that exhibit. On February 20th, 1976, 8 days after his 80th birthday, Louis E. Eliasberg died. He is buried at the Baltimore Hebrew Cemetery in Baltimore, Maryland. Though Q. David Bowers spent a week with him in the summer of 1975, evaluating and appraising the collection, Eliasberg never made arrangements for the disposal of his coins, leaving that task to his two sons. The gold coins were left to Louis Eliasberg Jr. and the rest to Richard Eliasberg. As Eliasberg became a numismatist so he could own gold, and as it was his collection of US gold coins that he first completed, it is fitting that his gold coins were the first to be auctioned. That sale occurred in 1982. Curiously, without any mention of Eliasberg by name in the catalog. The sale of the copper, silver, and paper currency was not completed until nearly 15 years later. Those items, over 3,000 lots, were sold in two separate auctions a year apart, in 1996 and 1997. Dave Bowers, who auctioned them all, observed in his Welcome to the Sale letter, introduction to the 1996 catalog, quote, "That is the Eliasberg collection specimen, will be a statement of pride that can be made by every successful bidder in this auction." Even today, 25 years after the sale of Eliasberg's US coins, an Eliasberg provenance adds value to a coin. Indeed, under the Set Registry drop-down menu at its website, PCGS has a special listing called Eliasberg Coin Album. Now let's return to the other mid-century milepost and look at the career of Charles M. Williams after he sold his entire coin collection to the Kossoff Partnership. We know from the announcement in the Numismatic Gallery Monthly that the $1804 and the 1822 half eagle were immediately placed privately. We also know that his 1873 Carson City No Arrows dime was sold at an LA auction in June of 1950, as was the 1853 O No Arrows or Rays half dollar. But Williams' name is nowhere to be found in the catalog of that June 1950 auction. The name and face on the title page are those of silent film star Adolphe Menjou. Dave Bowers reports that most of the coins in the Menjou catalog were in fact the gold and silver coins that Kossoff's partnership had purchased from Charles Williams. The copper coins were dispersed several months later in November 1950 via a mail bid only auction that also did not mention Williams' prior ownership. In researching a coin's provenance, there's a good chance that it once belonged to Charles Williams if it can be traced back to the Menjou sale or the Numismatic Gallery mail bid auction of November 1950. But unlike Eliasberg, whose reputation is inextricably linked to his coin collecting, Williams appears to have lost nearly all interest in numismatics after selling his coins. And unlike Eliasberg's sons, who were instrumental in the disposition of their father's coins, Williams' family had no interest in his coins. Within 5 years after his death, a researcher was attempting to gather some information about a particular coin from that November 1950 mail bid auction. He wrote to Williams' son asking if there was any information available from the Williams family. The son replied that all of his father's notes and records were gone, and all of his assistants and colleagues were dead. The son surveyed other family members, but none had any idea where information might be found about Charles Williams' coins. When he sold his coins, Williams was not yet 40 years old. So what did he do for the next 45 years? Well, it appears he threw himself into a number of different activities. We mentioned earlier that he graduated from Georgetown University. After graduation, he became very active in alumni affairs. He served as president of the Georgetown Club of Cincinnati, and for a time served on the national governing body of the Alumni Association. In 1952, he was one of the first recipients of the John Carroll Award, given to alumni to honor their achievements and record of service that exemplify the ideals and traditions of Georgetown and its founder, for whom the award is named, John Carroll. Charles Williams was also a ham radio operator who, during the Vietnam War, used his skill to connect servicemen in Southeast Asia with their families back home. He served for a time as president of the Gray Museum of Wireless History. He also raised thoroughbred horses and for a time was the president of the Cincinnati Charity Horse Show that raised money to benefit Cincinnati Children's Hospital. He also raised Dalmatians at his Williamsdale Kennel. He was a trustee of the Cincinnati Historical Society for 40 years and a trustee of the Cincinnati Foundation. But most importantly, for 66 years, he served the family insurance company, Western and Southern, first as a salesman, then as president for 6 years, and then as a member of the board of directors for 40 years. For 16 of those 40 years, he served as chairman of the board. He planned to retire from the board following the company's board meeting on Tuesday, March 10th, 1998, after 66 years of service to the company. But on March 5th, Charles Williams died. He was 85 years old. He's buried at the Gate of Heaven Catholic Cemetery in Cincinnati, Ohio. In his obituary in the local Cincinnati newspaper, his son is quoted saying, "At one time, he had the finest coin and gun collections in the nation." It seems from that quote that his interest in guns waned, like his interest in coins. Autographs, on the other hand, appeared to have remained a lifelong obsession. When Williams was 6 years old, he began collecting autographs of US presidents, their family members, and their cabinets, together with autographs of candidates for the office of president. One of his daughters said he was working on his autograph collection the week before he died. Although he left the world of coins behind in 1950, he nevertheless maintained his membership in the American Numismatic Association until he died. Late in his life, in 1983 and 1993, his name appeared in the Numismatist on the list of 50 and 60-year members. However, when he died, no one seems to have told the American Numismatic Association. The Numismatist, which every month lists by member number those who have recently passed away, did not acknowledge Williams' death until more than 6 years after he died. By the way, they list him here as life member 4189, which is not really true because 4189 was his regular member when he joined in 1933. So far as I've been able to determine, he never upgraded to a life membership, because if he had, he would have ended up with a 3-digit or a smaller number, because life members are given different numbers. Provenance. One of the great things about collections like Eliasberg and Williams is that for each of the ultra-rare coins, like those we've highlighted earlier, there are a multitude of common coins that can still be had by collectors of more modest means. To illustrate that point, I want to conclude with a story about a lowly half-cent. I collect half-cents by die variety. This is an 1805 C2 variety, according to the taxonomy created by Roger Cohen. It is a really scarce die variety that you don't see today. When I encountered 4 examples on the Bourse floor at the 2010 Early American Coppers Convention, I decided I had to buy one of them. But this specimen had these scratches that cut across the top of Liberty's head and into the field behind it. They were really rather unsightly. It really bothered me. But 2 of the other specimens were in worse shape, and the 4th specimen was way, way nicer, but also way, way out of my price range. Today, I couldn't be happier with these scratches. Let me tell you why. In 2010, when I bought this coin, I had never heard of Charles Williams. I was just shopping for a fairly scarce die variety that I needed for my collection. I was able to negotiate what I thought was a fair price for this quite scarce variety. 10 years later, during the height of the pandemic, the Early American Coppers Convention was held virtually. I shared this coin via Zoom at what copper collectors call the half-cent happening. The next day, my friend and fellow half-cent enthusiast, Bob Kebler, emailed me that he'd looked through some old coin catalogs in his library and had concluded that the coin I shared once belonged to Charles M. Williams. That was my first introduction to Charles Williams. That introduction was the inspiration for what ultimately became this talk. I was able to replicate Kepler's research and find out even a bit more about my coin. It was lot 718 in Kossoff's November 1950 mail bid. It was once listed by Walter Breen as the 5th finest known for the dye variety, and once competed in an EAC whist match that was written up in the EAC journal, Pennywise. Its provenance includes well-known half-cent collectors Michael Spurlock and Robert Schoenwalter. You see, these ugly scratches marring the face of the coin serve to easily identify this coin as an historically important specimen once belonging to Charles M. Williams. One might say it was the best of coins, it was the worst of coins. With apologies again to Charles Dickens, I will end there. If you want to learn more, here are some sources and photo credits. If there are any questions, I'll be glad to try and answer them. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Franklin. I really enjoyed that. And it's cool how you came to learn about the topic through buying that coin that you didn't know correlated with the collection. I thought that was a really fun story. So thank you for the presentation. If you want to go ahead and stop sharing your screen, should be a red button somewhere.
Here we go.
Awesome, just so everyone can see you full screen. Awesome, if anyone has any questions, put them in the Q&A box. I see several coming in right now, so we will start the Q&A now. Someone asks, did one of the collections value quality, or were they both just looking towards completion of the collection?
The short answer to that is I'm not really sure. I was looking clearly at the ultra rare coins I was showing. They both had quite high quality specimens of those. I've heard people say that collectors today place a lot more emphasis on quality than Louis Eliasberg did. I've also heard said that it was not popular to collect by dye variety in those days, which I think is probably true in terms of popularity, but it was clearly a thing because Charles Williams had a fairly complete collection of half cents by Gilbert numbers. Gilbert preceded Roger Cohen in writing a treatise on half cents, and his half cent collection had a lot of the Gilbert dye varieties, and the catalog identified them as such by Gilbert number. I would say between the two, I can't really say that one had a higher quality collection of coins than the other. They were both looking to complete sets.
Okay. Another question, does the Williams provenance add any monetary value to the half cent?
I don't know the answer to that. I've read in it, when you go through, if you're the numismatist has a digital archive that you can look through and search, and I searched for Williams in the digital archive, and mostly what I found is, in addition to his initial application and membership in the ANA, are references to his name in the provenance of a number of coins. Bowers, when he writes about some of the coins in collections that he has sold that have a Charles Williams provenance, mentions that he is not well known today. He's not a collector whose collection is celebrated like Eliasberg. But I found it fascinating, and I wanted to delve into it, and so I did. I've never sold my half cent, so I don't know what it's going to bring. And I don't know if a Eliasberg provenance adds value like, if a Williams provenance adds value monetarily like an Eliasberg one likely would. It certainly added value to me to learn all those things I described about the coin.
Yeah, okay, very interesting. We have another question. Are the Eliasberg coins traceable today?
Some of them are. And in fact, if you go to the PCGS website, there are a number of coins in PCGS slabs that list the Eliasberg provenance on the label of the slab. I don't think I could say that every coin that was in the Eliasberg auctions, and there were actually a total of 4 Eliasberg auctions in later, I believe in 2005 or maybe 2007, his foreign gold was also auctioned. I doubt that we could trace every specimen of Eliasberg's collection today, but there are a lot of them out there that are identified as such and that can be. The catalogs that accompanied all of the auctions of his coins were incredibly detailed. Dave Bowers cataloged them all, and in the catalog he credits and thanks Mark Burkhart for being the laboring oar in doing the writing. And so each coin is incredibly well researched and written up in the catalog. So it's not too difficult if you've got some connection to a coin that might be an Eliasberg coin to find it in one of those catalogs and compare it.
Okay. Another one, fantastic presentation. Is there an estimate of what Louis Eliasberg paid to acquire all of the coins in his collection?
Yes, there is actually, again, from Dave Bowers. He's reported as saying that Eliasberg invested $400,000 over his lifetime in his coin collection. Excluding the foreign gold, just the US coins, when the 3 auctions were complete, realized $40 million in prices realized. Wow. So it was quite a lucrative investment on the part of Louis Eliasberg. The foreign gold brought in an additional $15 million when they were auctioned several years later.
Wow, that's a pretty good return on investment, I would say. We have another question. Did the Eliasberg collection also include all of the proof specimens?
Interesting question. One of the things that you read about Eliasberg is that when he was collecting, collectors didn't often distinguish between proofs and circulation strike coins. So it included both, but not separately. I don't think he included, some of his specimens were proof coins, but he didn't set about to do a complete collection of circulation strikes and a complete collection of proofs. But some of the coins in the collection are proof.
Okay. Which of the 1913 5-cent specimens was in the Eliasberg collection?
It's a trick question. I don't know the answer to that. I could have made this a 3-day presentation by simply going through and picking a lot more individual coins to highlight. 1913 nickels are clearly one of the rare coins that was included and could be described. I'm afraid I don't have that description on the tip of my tongue. I'd have to look that up in the catalog to find out which specimen Eliasberg had. Great question.
Yeah, but it might be included if you wanted to look up the PCGS registry of his coins. His would probably be listed there if they knew. So whoever commented that could check it out there if they wanted to. I don't see any other questions. There are a lot of comments in the Q&A. Just thanking you for a very interesting talk. People loved the story of your half-cent find and how that connected to the Williams collection. So everyone seemed to really enjoy the presentation, and I did as well. It looks like we got one more maybe. Oh, someone said they have the 1799 half eagle from the Eliasberg collection, which was in the Harry Bass collection.
Well, congratulations to you. That is great. A great thing to own.
Yeah. There's another question. Were there branch mint proof dollars in Eliasberg collection?
Again, going back, I don't know the answer to that. He clearly did have all of the branch mint coins. That was his goal, both all coins by date and mint mark. But as I mentioned, he didn't really distinguish between proofs and circulation strikes. And I don't know whether all of the proofs that would have been struck, if there were, at branch mints in the collection. So the short answer is, I don't know.
Okay.
Great question.
That's perfectly fair. So that is all of the questions. Like I said, several comments, but no more questions. So I'll start wrapping up, but if anyone has any other questions, you can still put them in there and we can get to them after I do some closing stuff. But I just want to thank Franklin Noel for coming and speaking to us for this hour. Really enjoyed the presentation, as did all of the attendees that came. So we just wanted to thank you for speaking.
Well, thank you for having me.
No problem. And then to all the attendees, we hope you enjoyed this presentation. Sounds like you guys did. And we hope that you tune in to more presentations. We'll have more presentations starting at 2:30 Eastern time. So give you a little half-hour break to do whatever you need to do and then jump back on Zoom. And we also have presentations all day tomorrow on Saturday. So we hope to see you guys in another one of our Zoom presentations. So thank you guys for coming.